My mother always told me from when I was really small, she consistently told me, she was like, you have to work 3 times harder
Yeah.
to be seen as equal.
Hi Shabaka,
Hi.
thank you for coming and sitting with me and gonna have a nice little chat. I was gonna do the whole intro, but I feel like it would be best coming from yourself.
Yeah.
And don't be shy, don't be modest, because if you leave anything out, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be like, actually, he forgot to tell you that he's done this. So go ahead, tell the people.
Okay. So my name is Shabaka Hutchings. I
Okay.
play in 3 groups,
Right.
which are Sons of Kemet, The Comet is Coming, and Shabaka and the Ancestors.
Right.
That last group is a collaboration between myself and musicians from South Africa, from Johannesburg.
amazing.
But the first 2 are London-based.
Okay.
I play the saxophone and clarinet.
Wow.
I was classically trained, but like I play all types of music. I've just played in many, many different formations. I do a lot of composing. I compose for Sons of Kemet and the Ancestors, and just do loads of stuff.
Wait a minute, so you're in 3 groups,
3
okay?
groups, yeah.
All at the same time?
We kind of go in touring cycles. So in general, we'll have an album, and then that group will take the precedent for a year and do lots and lots of gigs. So we've just toured most of the kind of major festivals around Europe, and toured the world quite a lot. And then we'll be making an album for the other group while one group is touring.
Oh
So
my
then the
gosh.
next year we'll tour with the other band with a new album.
I know this is a bit controversial, but what's your favourite group?
They all just become the same thing
Yeah.
after,
Everyone's literally been saying that. So anyone who plays more than one instrument, I was like, what's your favourite instrument? They're like, oh, it's like a child, isn't it? The
Yeah.
mum can never say who the favourite child is.
Exactly, and they go in cycles.
Oh,
So
right.
Sons of Kemet might be my favourite for certain reasons.
Right, okay, right.
And then the Comet might be good for other ones.
So you're a really established jazz artist. What was you going to say?
I was going to say, I guess so. It feels like
There you go, being
I'm learning.
modest.
Yeah, no, but it feels like I'm learning how to be comfortable with what I do. That's the challenge.
What do you mean?
I think they're players that identify with certain elements of jazz.
Right, okay.
More than I do.
Okay.
My whole career has been a battle to come to terms with my own style.
Right, okay.
And it might be that when I started out, I was doing my thing, but felt like I was inadequate in some aspects.
Right.
And now at this stage, those inadequacies are actually strengths.
Right.
Because I've learned that, you can only do what you do.
Right.
And if you do that to the best of your ability, then you'll be free to actually not have self-doubt about other things.
Is it because your style of jazz doesn't necessarily fit the norm?
I guess now it kind of does, but
right.
at the time when I was studying, the general paradigm was that you try to emulate America as much as possible. And one of the big stages in my development was realizing that, I've learned a lot from the American style called jazz,
Yeah.
but I am from the Caribbean. And because I'm from the Caribbean, it means that, there is that link to Africa. Yeah. So these are the 2 roots that I want to emphasize in my music. Africa and the Caribbean, and with the kind of jazz history that I've come up with.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned America because representation is obviously really important, but like you were saying, you had to look to America kind of to get the gist of jazz or what jazz was or look for your role models. Do you feel like the UK is getting better now at having our own role models so that the younger generation can kind of maybe look up to people like you or other people to think, okay, this is what jazz can be also?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was younger, and this includes when I was in Barbados, even though I might have been jamming bits of jazz,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call myself a jazz fan. I would have actually said I didn't like jazz.
Right, okay.
If someone were to say the word jazz to me, what came into my head were older, richer, whiter people. And that's the image I had of the music.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't really encountered it in a situation that looked like me, or that kind of felt like the kind of thing that I was into. When I moved to England, one of the first people that I met literally was Soweto Kinch.
Right,
I met him backstage at a Courtney Pine concert. Courtney Pine gave me his number and said, call me anytime, I'll discuss stuff with you,
Wow.
about music. Soweto was doing a jam session once a week, and he just said, come down every week. And I went every week for about 3 years.
Wow.
I go to his house and practice with him. we'd hang out, we'd talk about music. And it's that experience of actually encountering the music in an environment that made me feel welcome, and that I could see, this is something that I could do. This is a viable option, for someone like me. That really helped,
Is that normal though, that you get those opportunities, or do you feel like you was maybe lucky that you was able to have those people around you to help you? Because some of the other guests that I've spoken to, they've said, they didn't have that environment, or it was difficult for them because the spaces that they were operating in, they didn't really see, people like themselves. So do you feel like yours is kind of like a isolated situation, or no?
I think that there's a constant development of that representation. So for instance, Gary Crosby in Tomorrow's Warriors has been trying to get that representation of black people doing jazz music, and young black people seeing their peers and actually elder musicians who are like them represented on stage. He's been doing that for the last 15 to 20 years. But still, it's like they're only now starting to see the fruits of all of that. And many musicians have come up with that being one of the only sources of representation on an institutional level that was around. My situation in terms of having very close mentors at that age is unusual. And in some ways, it's like if you're looking at situations that are communal, as in underrepresentation is a systemic problem. It doesn't make sense to really look at it on an individual level, because I had a certain experience as an individual. But if you're looking at me as a part of a broader group, then there is an underrepresentation of black people within the music industry and within that access to jazz, which is changing now. And that's one of the great things about the time that we're in now. You can see black women excelling at jazz. You can see black people on all aspects of the music industry. It's not enough, but it's definitely, you can see that progression forward.
Do you think social media has a part to play in that? Because now people can just obviously put out their music as of when they want to. They can build their own following. They don't have to wait for, the record labels to kind of invest in them. They can build their own brand. Do you think social media has helped with that?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, social media, it takes away an aspect of gatekeeping, which is that you can be visible, you can have an element of visibility without having to either pay money for a publicist or just have someone say, we decide that you are the person. And that will still be going on, but it means that there are roots and access points outside of the industry.
So you went to Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I auditioned to go to Guildhall. I didn't get in, so you must be really good, because talking about the environment, I know that there's not a lot of black people in those spaces. In fact, when I was auditioning for that, I think it was like I read a quota or something called stats, and it was like one black person like per year or something ridiculous that. There's hardly no black people in those environments. I tried for all the drama schools like RADA, all of those, and it's so difficult to get in. What was that time like being there? Well,
for one, there was very little black people. I think maybe in the 4 years that I was there, on the music course there might have been about 5 or 6 for the whole 4 years, and there was maybe about the same amount on the drama course. And it's just one of those things where, you just gotta keep beating down, knocking at the door, or actually looking at what's happening in terms of the entrance requirements. For me, it's like situations like this have to go back to the school, like what's happening at that high school level that's meaning that black students are not applying. Either they're not applying or they're applying and not getting in. So it needs to really be kind of looked at in a deep way about both of those possibilities. Either why are they not applying, or why are they applying but not getting in, proportionate to how many we are.
What's the curriculum like? Is it very old school still? Is it still what the people that they're educating you about? Were there black people that they educated you about, or was it predominantly like white musicians? How was that, and how did that affect how you started to make music?
Well, I did the classical course on clarinet. And I did it because at the time I was playing a lot of clarinet, and I wanted to just understand the history of that instrument. And I remember talking to Courtney Pine about it, and he says, because I could have done the jazz course or the classical course, and he was saying you want to get the course that has the longest tradition of teaching that instrument.
Right, okay.
As opposed to going for the jazz course but studying the clarinet on it. So, I mean, if you're going to do the classical course, it's doing a course in Western classical music. So there are going to be, no black people that you come into contact with. That's not to say that black people haven't been a part of that music tradition, but on the course it is pretty old school in that you don't get representation of black composers or black instrumentalists. But that's not what I was looking for me. I was doing that research on my own time.
Right.
And that's not to say that it shouldn't be a part of the course.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect any better from them. I went in thinking that this is the seat of the training for European culture, so that's what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
I see my role within that institution of assimilation. Like, let's see what you've got to offer me, and then I'll take it and I'll add to it my own research. And my research is research of Africa and the Caribbean and aesthetics that govern, those musical, experiences.
Right. So you've just finished recording the album, right?
Yeah. Well, we recorded an album just before the first lockdown.
Okay.
That's about to come out in May.
Right,
And
nice.
that's an album with Sons of Kemet.
Nice, okay.
Which I'm really excited about. I think it's one of my favorite things that I've brought out, just because I've had so much time to actually digest and craft it over the last year. And then we're mixing the new Comets Coming album. That should be out next year.
And how's it been during lockdown, not being able to tour and stuff, and does that affect the way you make your music? Because I'm guessing getting to see the world, that influences you and your touring and whatnot. So how's that been for you lockdown and all this?
There's a simple answer and a complex answer. I'll give you the complex.
The complex answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's always different ways of looking at things, And for me, it's always a matter of perspective. Are you looking at it from an optimistic perspective or a pessimistic perspective?
Right.
And in a situation like what happened last year, for me, it's all about the optimism. You just got to see what was good about the situation. And what was good about it for me was that I got a chance to really reflect on who I was as an artist and what I need to do to progress. I was on the road so much, really we did in 2019, we did about 130 gigs in 10 months.
Oh my
which
gosh.
is approximately a gig every 3 days. But in general, they were clumped together, so it was just gig. Like we were touring like crazy. Like really, we were on the road in an old school way. And the year before, it was the same thing. And the year before, it was the same thing. So by the stage that the lockdown came, I'm just like, I was never going to have this chance to actually sit back and not chill, but rejuvenate. And I've realized through that process of creating during the lockdown that rejuvenation is different from inertia.
Right.
Like for me, rejuvenation isn't sitting still and not doing anything. Rejuvenation is just being in a position where I can actually reflect on how I go forward.
Right.
And once I've got that flow, then it's all good. But it's scary. I'm not saying this as if it was an easy process.
Yeah.
It was a process in terms of the lockdown and finding my creative balance. It was a process of realizing what I need to give up in terms of my kind of artistic practices and what I need to include that, differently. It's all a learning process. I think I've come out of it a more balanced musician, and I've been learning like new technologies and ways of making music, and elements of recording myself that I had no time to do when I was on the road.
How difficult or how many challenges have you faced as a black musician?
It's a tough one that my mother always told me from when I was really small. She consistently told me, she was like, you have to work 3 times harder to be seen as equal. And that's something that I've taken through my life as a fixture. Like you have to work harder. Like you've got to do that. So there have been, like for instance with Guildhall, because of the lack of black people getting in, I'm sure that if you're equal, you're not equal. You know what I mean? I'm sure that if you give a similar performance to someone else, that it's not equal to the same, it doesn't equate to the same leverage in terms of getting into the college. But that just means you've got to practice harder than everybody else. In terms of outright discrimination, I've not experienced a lot of it like to my face. In terms of microaggressions, but for me, I try to see things from an optimistic perspective. I try to see things as reasons why I need to work harder. And that's the main thing I take from it. there's not a lot of instances that are coming into my head where I feel defeated by discrimination, where I feel like there's been discrimination that hasn't caused me to try to push harder. And maybe that's a self-defense mechanism. Because despair is the most crippling. Like despair, if you think that there's a situation that you've been placed in where you can't learn and you can't go forward. And so I try to turn any situation of discrimination or lack of understanding as an impetus for trying to push forward and just better myself.
You mentioned before about your roots, about, you know, Barbados and then Caribbean and then linking it back to Africa. How important is it for that to come through in your music? Because I was talking to a couple of the guests before, and they were saying, you know, sometimes as Black people, it's really difficult to kind of balance, you know, talking about things that affect us as Black people, but then just also maybe talking about how water is blue and not, you know, not having to, you know, talk about maybe the struggles or the traumas or the stuff that we've been through. How important is it to you, and do you find it hard to find a balance?
Yeah, I think it is difficult finding the balance, but I've learned that I just, as an artist, I need to just reflect what I'm going through.
Right, yeah.
What I'm going through, as in what I'm dealing with on a ideas level. And I'm really interested in Black history. And I'm interested in what's made myself, what my makeup is. Like, what are the elements that have resulted in me being where I am. Which means that you kind of analyze yourself and then go back, you know, go back and back and back. So I put that out in my music. But that's just me. It doesn't, and that's where I'm at in my life. It might be that in 5 years' time I don't feel like doing that. So I don't think it's necessary to wear your identity on your sleeve, but I think it's necessary to have an integrity and put forward what you're dealing with, and just to be curious and searching about it. You know, like it's worth reflecting on your identity, you know, because if you don't reflect on your identity, you know, nobody will. And it might be that it's not that we're in neutral bubbles culturally. Like there are, you know, we're in a situation where there are cultural hegemonic forces that are pushing. Obviously, I saw that early in my life with the hegemonic force of America dominating the space of what I thought was the pinnacle of music. And we see this in, you know, time and time again. So for me, it's like you've got to really have a strong foundation of who you are if you're going to actually dictate the culture that you're a part of. You know, because culture isn't just something that stands separate to people. Culture is something that people, the musicians and the artists, give meaning to. So that meaning's only going to be fluid and it's only going to be vibrant if we're constantly trying to search for like what we are representing. You know, because for me the travesty is to get an idea of oneself and to keep it. You know, to keep it kind of doggedly for years and years, like I am black, and black is this and that. You know, whereas things change. You know, that's one of the few things that you can say is a constant in nature and in everything, in the way the world functions. It's like change is a fact of life. So if you're going to identify something, it's got to be something that has change as a part of that basic makeup. So, you know, a lot of the ways that I structure my artistic processes are based on like search and inquiry into who I am, who I imagine I am. So our last album with Sons of Kemet is called Your Queen is a Reptile. Each track title is a kind of homage to different women throughout history. So you might have a track called My Queen is Angela Davis, or My Queen is Harriet Tubman, or My Queen is Doreen Lawrence, for instance. And the idea behind that was trying to ask, how do we pick our leaders? You know, because it's not just saying, oh, you know, the monarchy has a tail and a forked tongue. It's just saying the monarchy is a construct that can be disassembled. It can be mocked, it can be mimicked, or it can be revered and praised. If we choose to not give it reverence, and if we choose to put someone else on that pedestal, even if it's just on an ideological level, how do we make those choices? You know, why do you choose Angela Davis? Why do you choose Harriet Tubman? And what principles do they have that you look up to.
Yeah.
And then it's about looking at how do you take those principles and then apply it to the people that are supposed to be in charge.
Right.
And if they fall short, then what?
Yeah.
So it's just about, questioning and constant learning about how things are made up around you.
So you've got an album coming out in May.
Yeah.
And you're finishing up the other album, or you're finishing up the other album that you said?
We're kind of album's going to come out next year.
Okay.
But we've got an album that's ready to go in May.
May, okay. Yeah. And can you tell us what it's called?
I can't tell you what it's called yet.
Oh God, I'm trying to always get the drops. No one wants to give me the drops. I'm trying to get the exclusive information. So tell the people where they can find you. Are you on? You should be on. I'll be surprised if you're not on socials.
Yeah, I'm on socials.
I know. I don't know. You sometimes you give me this like vibe of mysteriousness. Like you're there, but you're not really there. Like, do you get that?
I do get.
Yeah. See that vibe of like, I'm not on socials. You just have to find my music, and if you can find it, it's for you, and if you can't,
that's right.
Bad luck.
Yeah. I'm on socials, but I don't follow anyone, so I'm not I don't hang out there.
Oh, one of those people.
I'm that guy.
So let the people know where they can find you.
So I'm on Instagram. Most of my stuff I put on Instagram, and I see my Instagram page as a document of what I'm up to.
Right,
I'm an archiver.
Okay.
So I kind of give, if you follow my Instagram page, you'll just see what my life is.
Okay.
Like anything I do to do with my kind of artistic life, I'll do a little kind of picture or a video or something to say to the audience, but mainly to myself.
Right.
This is what I did on this day.
Cool.
I'm also on Facebook, got an artist page, and on Twitter. So my Instagram is Shabaka Hutchings, and it's basically that for everything else. On Twitter, I think it's Shabaka with an H. So Shabaka.
Do you not follow anyone on Twitter then?
Don't follow anyone anything.
Oh wow! I mean, I'd love to do that on Twitter because Twitter is just.
Yeah.
Don't follow anyone on Twitter. Don't do it to yourself. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
So guys, thank you for watching. And as we've mentioned in this discussion, we need you to take part in this survey so we can understand what's happening so that a change can be made. So guys, what we need you to do is we need you to head over to blim.org.uk/change, and you can anonymously fill out the survey, and we need you to do this so that we can actually make a change. Bye.
At the moment, there is no data on the experiences of Black musicians and professionals within the UK music industry. Let your voice be heard by filling out the survey. You can do this by going to blim.org.uk/change.